today's video, I'm going to be talking about the Zhiyun Cinepeer Weebil 3E. This is a very capable gimbal that comes in at a very affordable price. Just a quick disclaimer, Zhiyun did send me this product to keep so I could make this review. So when you buy a gimbal, the main purpose of this device is to stabilize your camera footage. And this gimbal does that very well. It handled my bigger, heavier setups such as my caged A7 IV with my 24-70 f2.8 very well. And it's definitely in the heavier end of what you would put on this gimbal. So it handled it very well and I was very impressed in that regard. I believe that setup actually totals around 4 pounds, and according to Zhiyun, the maximum capacity of this gimbal is about 6.5. So it's well within range, and so it worked very well as expected. So it is capable of even more than that if you really wanted to push it, but I wouldn't recommend it because at some point it is kind of awkward to hold a gimbal that's that heavy. But I would recommend trying to find a lighter setup that you can put in your gimbal because it would just make the strain on your arms a lot easier. So one of the things that I was using is my Sony a7R II without a cage and with my 16-35. And this is a pretty light and small setup, and that definitely made it a lot more enjoyable to use the gimbal. But that being said, it stabilizes your footage very well, and it should be able to handle most of what you'd throw at it in a typical shooting scenario. It's safe to say that its basic purpose is accomplished very well, and it stabilizes your footage. It's as simple as that. So it does come with other features aside from being good at that basic function. There's a lot of options in the menu system as far as what you can do. I haven't really dived into them too much, but there's a lot there that I will start to explore as I use this gimbal more. So some of the things that I think are pretty useful, you can set the dial to a number of different things. You can use it for electronic zoom if you have a lens that supports that. You can use it for focus if you pair it with your camera properly. And you can even adjust things like aperture and shutter speed and a number of other things, which is really, really cool. You can pair that all with this scroll wheel on the front right here, which is really handy because having to adjust your grip and then reach up to the camera can be a bit slower of a process. So if you can just do that right here, it's way faster. Same thing with the built-in record button. You can pair that with a USB-C cable right on the side here, and that will go straight in your camera, and then you can do it over Bluetooth, and you can really easily start and stop recordings without having to constantly reach up to the camera. So that's a really handy feature to have. One of the other nice things is that you can adjust the sensitivity of the joystick really easily, and also you have a ZY Play app, and that's not something I've used yet, but that is an option there if you want to control things wirelessly from your phone. And that gives you access to all the same settings that you would on the actual menu within here, but just wirelessly, so you don't have to touch the actual gimbal. So if you wanted to be in front of the camera or you just can't access it for whatever reason, you have options wirelessly through the Bluetooth app. So going through some pros and cons about this gimbal, one of the great things is its size. By the time you take off the tripod handle, it actually is fairly small when it's folded up like this. It's pretty reasonable. All of my rigging equipment to build out my full rig on my camera, I wouldn't really travel with that because it's just so much, it just becomes a little bit more of a pain to carry with me and everything. But this one piece here, I don't think bothers me as much, and I'd be willing to travel with this. It's small enough. According to Zhiyun, it's smaller than an A4 paper, so it's definitely within reason to fit this in a backpack. One of the other great things about traveling with this gimbal is the battery life. I went out and shot with it for a full hour, and I came back and I plugged it in to recharge it a bit, and the battery was still full. So I have no concerns about battery life when it comes to this. I believe it was rated for 16 hours if I remember correctly. I'll put it on the screen if I'm wrong, but it's a very long amount of time and you really won't have to worry about it. But if it does become an issue, you can actually charge it while it's running. So you can run it into a power bank if you really get to a point where it's almost dead. So that's a really nice handy feature to have in a pinch. So there is another pro to this that I won't really use I don't see myself using much, but it is there and I may end up using it in the future. And that is this piece right here, which allows you to really easily switch this into a vertical orientation. So if you need to move between landscape and vertical orientations really quickly to get short form and long form content, there's a really easy way to do that just by taking this piece off of the arm, and then you can put it right into here. And you don't have to mess with much. You just remove it from the gimbal, flip it, and then put it back on. And then maybe you need to rebalance it depending on how it's balanced. But it is a handy feature to have if you're gonna shoot a lot of vertical video. I personally don't do that, so I don't think I'll find much use for that feature in my own work. Another pro is that it's compatible with Zhiyun's sling grip, which would be a bit bigger and a bit more comfortable for longer days of shooting. So that is an option of an add-on that you can buy if you wanted to. So jumping into the cons, there's really not much. I think that this really just accomplishes the basic purpose of a gimbal extremely well, and it's a reasonable price. So the only cons that I could find have less to do with this specific gimbal as they are just things that I would have liked to do with a gimbal in general. And that is specifically support for some kind of follow focus system. So one of the things I like to do is shoot with manual vintage lenses a lot, And eventually I would like to buy a few cinema lenses at some point as well. And those are all manual, so you have to have a follow focus system of some kind if you want to move the focus during a shot. I did actually do some filming with my vintage 35mm Takumar, and that went really great. I got some of my favorite shots last night with that setup. But the problem I had with it is that you have to set your focus first by actually adjusting things against the motors as it's on the gimbal. And once you do actually find focus, it's locked as you do your shot. So you can't actually change it. If you were using autofocus lenses, you can pair it and adjust your focus with this wheel here. But I don't want to always have to use autofocus lenses, so I think that feature is a really great workaround if you had to work around it, but I would have loved to see some kind of support for a follow focus system on this. I think it's fair to say that those are more premium features and those are reserved for the higher end gimbals that Zhiyun sells. So if that is something you personally need, then you're going to have to consider that in your purchase and look at different gimbals potentially. So given the price of the gimbal and the fact this is meant to be a budget gimbal, I don't really see that being a major con because it isn't super relevant, I don't think, to the target audience of a gimbal like this. I think most people that are using this are not going to be using it with manual lenses. And if you're using proper cinema lenses, you're probably going to have the budget for a bigger, heavier gimbal anyway. But it is something that I miss, and I'd like to have a way to adjust focus on my manual lenses during a shot. So in terms of overall value, I think for the price, this is great. It accomplishes the basic purpose of a gimbal to stabilize your footage very well. Some of the shots that you're seeing right now, I was in some slip-on shoes. It's not really the right footwear to get the walking form that you need to get those perfectly smooth shots. And I was on rough terrain on top of that. And so this actually stabilized the footage way better than I thought it would. I thought those shots weren't going to be very good because of the shoes and the rough terrain, but honestly it did a really, really great job. Here you can see a side-by-side of the same two shots. One of them is handheld on my rig and the other one is with the gimbal. With my rig, I'm able to get much smoother shots when I'm on even ground and when I have proper shoes. But in that scenario, I really struggled to get a smooth shot. And I did only do one take, so I maybe could have gotten it better, but you can just see the difference. The gimbal did a very good job of stabilizing that footage. So it's also a very small gimbal, and it has great battery life, and it's very affordable. It becomes even more affordable when you use the code in the description. You can get 10% off, so check that out if you're interested. So I would encourage you to go use that link in the description below and the code down below. It is an affiliate link, so it helps support the channel, and you are getting 10% off, so that helps too. If you are considering buying this gimbal, please go check out those links down below. So just to give you a quick rundown of how to use the gimbal, first of all, you're going to want to put the right plate on the bottom of the camera. One thing you can do to actually make this a bit faster is put quick release plates on here. So you can attach this plate here to a quick release plate for Arca Swiss or for something else. And then that way you can just pop the camera onto this rather than having to tighten a screw every single time. And that would make things faster if you're worried about how long it takes to get things into the gimbal. That would definitely help if you're looking for a way to speed that up. First, I'm gonna just go through and unlock all of the axes on the gimbal. Now you can slide the camera into the gimbal. Make sure that this is in the unlocked shape so that you can slide it in. And now what we can do is lock off some of these other axes and and balance the gimbal one axis at a time, because that's going to be a little bit easier to nail down everything. Something to keep in mind while you're balancing the gimbal is you're going to want to set your tilt screen or flip out screen and your lens zoom to where it needs to be, because you can see just how much it changes. You're going to want to set it to, if it's a lens like this where it doesn't move too much, you can maybe set it in between and then zoom as needed without rebalancing. But if it's something like the 24-70 that I like to film on, that's going to have a pretty big difference of shifting the weight at 70mm versus 24, so you are going to have to rebalance it there. So now I think I've got this balanced, so I'm going to pull on this lever here to lock it into place. And now I can unlock my next axes and lock this one down this time. So now I can see that it seems to be leaning this direction a little bit. So I'm going to get this lever on the bottom here and then slide that arm just a little bit to the left. So one of the other things is you want to get this arm perfectly balanced, and it's already balanced just like that right now, but otherwise it might just tip forward on you. You want it to get to a point where it can sit like that and not move. And so the way that you would do that is by unscrewing this and then sliding this piece here up and down this arm. But I already have it balanced like that, so I'm going to leave it. Make sure all of the axes are unlocked first. Otherwise you might get a axis lock error like I did. I couldn't figure out what was wrong, but I accidentally left one of these locked. So make sure you unlock those. If you see the axis lock error, that might also be that your gimbal is off balance. So now I'm going to go ahead and hold down the power button and you'll see that it will actually center itself. One of the other things you're going to want to make sure to balance is this piece down here. If you want to learn more about balancing your gimbal, go and check out a dedicated video somewhere else on YouTube, as someone else will explain it far better than I have here. But I think that's enough to get you up and started. Now, as far as the basic functions, you'll have this joystick on the bottom here, and that will allow you to move it around. You have your record button, and then your mode button, which will switch you through your pan follow, which will follow as you pan. Otherwise, you have a lock, which won't move at all. And then you've got a follow, which will also follow up and down movements and everything else. But I mostly just leave it on pan follow, and I maybe switch to lock or follow occasionally. But pan follow is probably enough for most of what you need. Otherwise, you can throw it into lock and then just pair it with the joystick to get more specific movements. Now, you also have the scroll wheel on the front here. I have it set to pan up and down, but I might set it up to do something like shifting focus or changing the aperture instead, because I think that might be more useful for my style of shooting. I would rather use the joystick to go up and down instead. I don't really need that redundant functionality, so I think I'll change that later, but there are plenty of options that you can set this to for whatever you want to do with it. The other thing you have here is the trigger on the front, and you can double click that and it will just reset the gimbal, and that's a really great way to get it back where you need it really quickly. So you can just double click that and it'll reset. The other thing you can do is a triple click and it'll flip around on you. Digging into the actual menu system, you can press the menu button and then you can use this scroll wheel here, and this scroll wheel presses in as a select. So you can go through and set up a number of different functions here, changing joystick sensitivity, all those good things. This is also where you set up the Bluetooth if you want to pair it to your camera through Bluetooth to use the record button and all the other features. Otherwise, if you don't want to do Bluetooth, you can use a Type-C connection. There's a Type-C port right here, and put it straight in, and then that'll make it really easy to get up and running with that record button and some of the other features like moving focus with this dial. So that's the Zhiyun Cinepeer Weebil 3E. If you're interested in buying one of these, check out the affiliate link down below. And I would really appreciate it, as it supports the channel, and there's 10% off in the coupon code that you can find in the description. Otherwise, that's all I have for you today, so have a great day and happy shooting.